All right. Well, Rennie, thank you for being here with us today. I am very excited for this conversation that has been it's been in the works for a long time, but then I had a baby and that messed up my brain and now I'm back. But you
Yep,
know how
life
the
life was
motherhood
lifing
brain. Yeah, life was
for sure.
lifing. Life is always lifing.
Yep.
But I'm really, really excited to share not only your current book that I have sitting in front of me right here, also a book that is coming out. But before we get into the books, I want to talk about you
Sure.
and your journey with not only food and body image, but with working with the Fine Food Freedom team. So
Yeah.
I would love to hear from you, like before working with Fine Food Freedom.
Yep.
What was your relationship with food and body image like?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you first off for having me.
Of
I'm a big
course.
fan of you, your team, your
Awesome.
podcast. So I dieted most of my life from, I would say, age 14 to 38, 39. It was a way of life. It was something my mom did. It's something my friends did. And it wasn't until I was in a riding accident in 2019. I've been a competitive equestrian most of my life that I had some downtime and I discovered some books about this anti-diet movement. And the idea was brand new to me that there was life outside of, trying to make myself smaller. So I really started from the very bottom, reading books on the subject and just kind of coming to a place of like, I had two young daughters, and I didn't want them to have the upbringing that I did. I didn't want their worth to be tied into their bodies, the way they looked. So since I had this downtime, I just really threw myself into education and what dieting for all those years really did to my body and the fact that there was another way to live. The thing that I didn't realize until I met with Julie on your team is that what I figured out for myself was I made peace with my body. I stopped dieting. I had no shame or morality about food anymore. But the piece that I was missing was the intuitive eating. I wasn't intuitive eating
Mm,
yet. I was just not dieting. And when that kind of came to a head for me, that I thought that maybe there was more and I could maybe feel better in my body without trying to lose weight, that's when I met Julie and like the next phase began. And things have been so much better since. And so I'm really grateful for connecting with her.
that is incredible. If you don't mind when you're talking, it's just hitting a little bit. Is that going
Oh,
to be
sure.
annoying if you have to hold it up?
Not at all. I'll
Okay,
hold it just
okay.
like this.
Perfect, perfect. Well, so before we got on today's interview, I was like, I want to like go back and see when Rennie started and find like her before, like when you kind of applied to work with Find Food Freedom. So do
Yeah,
you mind if I share a note from your paperwork?
not at all. I don't
Because
remember the beginning of that. So this will be news
exactly,
to me
I
too.
know. And I've done this before with a lot of clients and they're like, "Oh goodness, like what did I say?" And I
Yeah.
think this is so cool to do because it's like,
Mhm.
wow, that feels so far away from me now.
Yep,
Like it's like a
exactly.
completely different life.
Yeah.
So this paperwork was filled out on Thursday, May 30th of 2024. So a little shy of a year ago.
Mhm.
And we asked, how would you describe your relationship with food? And you put unpleasant, like you could check off pleasant, neutral, or unpleasant.
Mhm.
And you said super busy, but will never diet again. Feeling lost, very unhappy in the body I'm in.
Mm. That is so helpful to hear because I feel so differently now.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me personally, it comes up in therapy that I
Yeah.
can't remember where, my mindset from a year ago. It's like we sort
Yes.
of tend to live in the moment that way. So that's really interesting to hear because now I would say I have a positive relationship with food. And it is still a work in progress on
Of
body
course.
image, but I feel, and I think that that might be forever, which
Yeah.
is fine. But I just feel so much improved. And the fact that that was only May of last year is like a victory on top of a victory for me.
Of course. It's insane how different, like just
Yeah.
hearing you speak and reading these words. Because then after that, we said, separate from food, how would you describe your relationship with your body? Again, check pleasant, neutral, unpleasant. And we checked unpleasant. And it said, honestly, I'm very unhappy with the way I look, but I'm truly still grateful for all that my body has done and continues to do for me.
Half true now. Again, I would not say unpleasant. I would tend toward neutral. I think that there's a big shift in this kind of work when you go from feeling like you need to love your body and love the way, not love your body, love the way you look, to the
Yes.
shift of the way I look is the way I look. And it's not going to have an effect on my day, and it's not going to be that big of a deal in my life anymore. And that change has been remarkable, especially because my most recent appointment with Julie, we're sort of on an as needed basis now,
Awesome.
had to do with unintentional weight loss. And I realized how little attention I paid in my body because I didn't realize I had lost weight. It was other people telling me that I had before I even noticed myself. And I thought that that was kind of cool, actually, that it just is not on my radar the way it used to be, because it used to be top of mind. It used to be, the first thing I thought about when I woke up in the
Yes.
morning.
Yeah, that was your mission, right? That was your purpose
Yes.
of like,
It's
can I
part of my
shrink my body?
personality, honestly, and that
Yes.
is almost embarrassing to say now. I don't like remembering the way that used to feel.
Yeah. Oh, I resonate with that so deeply. But I feel like that's so amazing to hear now because, and I think that's a part of, I want to go back to when you said how like you thought you were intuitive eating, but really you
Yes.
were just not dieting,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And I think like the first principle of intuitive eating, which is reject the diet mentality, is
Hmm.
so difficult for people because of
Yes.
exactly what you just said. Dieting becomes our identity. It
Hmm.
becomes our purpose. We're known
Yep.
as the healthy one, right? Using heavy air quotes, we're known as the one who
Sure.
always eats
Works
good,
out.
right?
Yeah.
Works
Yep.
out, did it like all these things.
For
And
sure.
so when we stop doing that, it's like, well, what do I do?
It's a
Like, what
loss.
do I do
Yeah.
with this time? Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
loss. It's a grief.
Mhm.
So now losing that part of your identity,
Yeah.
what have you gained?
Oh my gosh. What haven't I gained? It really, it's so cheesy, and I should do better as a writer, but it's truly a new chapter for me.
Oh, I love
Um,
it. Drop
it,
that pun, girl.
I mean, it is like I'm in part three of my life now, and part two had a lot of joy and happiness and great things, but I was still stuck because while food didn't have the same control over me. I allowed all foods. I rejected diet culture completely. I still felt really bad. And I didn't know, I didn't notice that while I had rejected diet culture, I had not accepted and embraced intuitive eating. And I don't know if in your practice you use this term, but gentle nutrition.
Absolutely.
Um, and that was the complete game changer. And it was never about body size so much as feeling better in my body at whatever size or shape it wanted to be. So I think that the step from dieting and restricting to rejecting that completely, allowing all foods, that's the hardest part.
Hmm.
But once you do that and you kind of live in that place for a while, I think I was letting myself eat whatever, whenever, because I really didn't want to go back to that life of dieting. But I also didn't feel good. So it was like, what do I do from here? And that's why I reached out to Julie because I felt like there's another step here. There's more that I can do. I can feel better, but I'm clueless as to how. And the way she and I worked together and her advice was honestly not what I was expecting at all.
Mm, that I want to hear more about, but I want to just
Yeah.
thank you so much for obviously you being a writer and an author and an editor and all these things you speak so eloquently and I think you put such an amazing tone and verbiage to what so many people are feeling but
Mm,
don't know how to articulate because it's really hard when you haven't done this work yet to say what you're feeling. Like you know
mhm.
that dieting isn't the way,
Right.
but you don't know where to go from there. And I think that's
Yes.
one of the biggest misconceptions I see on social media and especially the comments like if I do any type of content on intuitive eating,
Hmm.
if I get a negative comment, it'll be like, I tried intuitive eating and it didn't work for me. And
Hmm.
oftentimes when I dig deeper or I'm like add curious questioning to that, people are just not dieting. They haven't
Yes.
even begun to scratch the surface of the intuitive eating
Yep.
work, right? And that's 10
Yep.
different principles. I mean, we're just barely scraping the surface here talking about gentle nutrition and rejecting the diet mentality, but there's so much more that goes into it of hunger and fullness cues, satisfaction, movement, body respect. I mean, we could go
Hmm.
on and on. So I would love to hear, were you skeptical when you reached out to get support from our team? And like, what were you expecting for support? This is perfect leading into what you just said. And then
Yeah.
like, what were you expecting versus what was the care that you actually received?
Sure, sure. So I think that going from a place of dieting for, my entire adult life to rejecting diet culture completely, that's like scaling a mountain. So I
Truly.
went into it like I did it. I scaled the mountain. I'm at the top. Yeah, there was definitely some skepticism. Like, how can you help me? I'm doing the things. I don't even remember which author it was that talked about the donuts and Doritos phase of rejecting dieting, where you just
Mm-hmm.
allow all the things. Like, I never really stopped doing that. And frankly, I gained weight as a result. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't fight that, but I was not happy about it.
Mm-hmm.
So when I met Julie, first of all, our very first call, I burst out crying when we were talking about body
Mm-hmm.
image and really surprised myself because I knew
Mm-hmm.
it was something I was struggling with, but actually articulating it and speaking about it out loud and having her face on the screen with me
Mm-hmm.
made it that much more real and that much more intense. And, a big part of rejecting diet culture for me in the first place was because I have two young daughters. And actually hearing the way I was speaking about myself and my body, it was like, it was hurtful, and to hear it out loud and to think like, my God, I just don't want this for my girls. So it was eye-opening in that first call, just um, how terrible I was being to myself. And then I would say what was surprising is that Julie was so willing to work within my own preferences and patterns and habits. You know, I I have undertaken every diet, every plan. I've met with professionals. I figured this would be more of the same, just without the shame involved in living in a bigger body or weight gain. I figured
Mm-hmm.
that it was a safe space,
Mm-hmm.
but I thought it would be more of what I was used to. And it was so different. I said to Julie a few sessions later, so ready to be like, to be shamed or to have her, be critical, if not very nice, because she's such a kind person. But I told her, I am most comfortable and most full when I eat Honey Nut Cheerios and milk and I have 2 cups of coffee before my kids get up. And then I'm good till like 10 o'clock. And Julie said, that's great. And I was like, what? Aren't you
You're
going
like,
to
excuse
lecture me
me?
about like why this is so problematic, right? That I'm drinking cow's milk, like, heaven forbid, and not, some plant milk and I have cream in my coffee, And she said, there's nothing wrong with that. If you feel good going through your morning with that breakfast, you keep that breakfast, full stop. And now I'm lost in a good way. And I'm like, okay, but what I would like to do in thinking about my health, not health the way we see it on social media, but like
Yep.
actual health and putting more nutrients into my body. I said to her, I feel like I don't eat enough fruits and vegetables. But the idea of eating fruit in the morning for breakfast was, and Julie filled in the end of my sentence. She goes, it gives you the ick. And I was like, yeah, exactly. She was like, okay, so put that out of your head. No fruit in the morning. You eat the breakfast that makes you feel good in the morning. If you're on vacation and that's not available and you find something else that you like, great, then you can add that into the repertoire. But then we worked together on the types of fruits and vegetables that didn't give me the ick.
I
And
love that you guys use give me the ick. Such
the
a
ick,
great
right,
terminology.
right, for food, for people,
Yes.
all the things.
Yes.
So she showed me ways to incorporate those. And another reason I wanted to do it was for my kids. I wanted lots of foods available in the house for them to experiment with. What do they like to eat? What makes them feel good? Um, so yeah, it's like that book about radical accept bodies and radical acceptance.
Yep.
Julie just radically accepted me and everything I brought to the table, and we worked with it. We didn't work against it. And she never gave me a piece of advice that felt like something that I didn't want to do already. It felt like half therapy and half here's a new way at looking at food and your body.
Oh, I feel like I have to take a deep breath. I'm getting like emotional because I know Julie and her heart so well. And then just
Uh-huh.
hearing you articulate how she's changed your life it's incredible. It's really incredible. And I think that's where I can't stress enough to people who are thinking about working with a professional, like an intuitive eating counselor. Like you said, we radically accept and we work with you. There is no shame and guilt. And
Hmm.
it's so hard to believe until you experience it because a lot of times our clients will say like I've never received care like this because there
No.
is so much weight stigma in
Hmm.
our medical system.
Yep.
um so to be radically accepted, which is wild when you think about it because it's just saying that everybody deserves respect and like dignity, but like
Right.
that is so
Right.
radical these days, which
It
is
is.
insane to me.
Yeah. And I just have to add, for the sake of adding it, that as a, white, cisgender, straight-sized woman, I
Yeah.
have a lot of body privilege. And I recognize that, acknowledge that. People who live in bodies that are marginalized have a much different experience than I do. That said, I feel like I got to know Julie pretty well, and I feel like I understand your philosophy pretty well. And I don't think it matters what body you come to this work with. I think you can be in a marginalized body and you will still be completely accepted because the work with Julie, it wasn't about eating, it wasn't about weight, it wasn't about my size. It was about being good to myself and approaching that in a way that I never had before. And so hence the new chapter. I just look at everything so differently now thanks to her.
Yeah, building that relationship with self and self-compassion and kindness and it like people go through this process and they're like it's not about the food. Like
Not
once
at
we
all.
get
Yeah.
through that, it's not about the food.
Yep.
Um wow, so
And
incredible to hear this story unfolding.
yeah.
So we have a client wins Slack channel where all of our providers, like when a client will reach out to us and say something, we will drop it in and just celebrate together of how we're
Mm.
changing lives. And I only know because of your equestrian
Mm.
sport that this
Yeah.
one was you because of the sport where
Uh-huh.
you said, finally, this is me at a horse show in Florida, giving no thought of how unflattering tan pants can be and just enjoying the sport I love. And then you
Hmm.
said, you are a rock star, Julie. I love this new version of my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, thinking about, the work that you guys did together and where it brought you, what is this third chapter look like in your life? Like now that you've freed your mind, and again, I always like to bring it back, and you said this earlier, like it's always a lifelong journey. It doesn't mean you're
Sure.
never gonna have a negative thought, right? But like now that the majority of your time is freed up from not obsessing over food, body image, what
Hmm.
has that allowed time for?
Yeah. Um, it's a I think that it really comes down to being present because to use my sport as an example, the equestrian world is one of the last places where body shaming still thrives. There is an ideal body type in this sport, and if you don't have it, too bad. I mean, stores only stock up to certain sizes that are not very big. Um, and there's a certain look that everybody wants to achieve on a horse, and some of us are built that way, and some of us are not. So the way I look in my riding clothes has always been in the back of my head at competitions because I mean, we wear nude flesh tan colored pants. Like there's just no way around that, not being the most flattering option for some people.
Who chose that wardrobe, by the way?
I wish I knew. Some riders wear rust-colored breeches, which are not much prettier, maybe a little more flattering, but in any case, just the ability to put it all aside at this show was groundbreaking for me. I mean, that's what I'm gaining. It's an ability to be present and to live sort of like outside of my body.
Mm,
I think last summer was when I was struggling the most. And I talked to Julie about that. And we talked about how, you're inside your body looking out and how important it is to take in what's going on around you rather than thinking about the world looking at you. And so
mm.
I think that's been that's been a huge gain. And like you said, it just frees up time and mental space and mental energy. And as I know, you know, being a mom and a professional and someone who's just constantly doing all the things, there's no room for stuff like that. There's no room to
Mm-mm.
watch sports, and there's no room for what do my thighs look like in these pants. So I think it's freed up brain space. And as a writer, I mean, there's no greater gift than that. Like I need all of the creative energy and space that I can. So yeah, it's just opened up so many possibilities between the time and the space.
That's incredible to hear. And I have so many clients that I worked with in the past. I'll never forget when one of my clients came to me and she was like, I'm so fucking sick of this taking up like 90% of my mental bandwidth. And
Yeah.
she was a mom of, multiple children and professional. And it's like you said, we don't have that time to give. And I think about when I was entrenched in diet culture, I'm very grateful that I was able to really transform my relationship with food and body image before children because I think about that all the time now of how I
Hmm.
don't have time
Yeah.
or how, like you said, it gives you this gift of presence because I think
Hmm.
about when I was in diet culture, sure, maybe I was physically somewhere, right? Like at a holiday or an event, but it was like you said, you're thinking about how the world is perceiving you versus being there. So the thoughts were, what are
Yeah.
they thinking about my body? I look terrible in this dress. I shouldn't have that piece of cake. But, blah, 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 blah. Like
Hmm.
you're not there.
It's so
But
much
now,
noise. Yeah.
right? But now you're present where like if you're at a wedding or if you're at your daughter's recital or if you're, you are there and you're
Hmm.
experiencing it. And that is invaluable. Like that is what it's all about.
Hmm.
Truly. And that's where I
Yep.
say, like, it's not about the food. Like, I had another client who was like, it's not intuitive eating, it's intuitive living. Because once you
Yes.
solve that,
Yes.
it has a ripple effect in every aspect of your
It's
life.
like eating in my life is now what it was always supposed to be.
Yes.
It is what it was when I was a kid, right? I'm
Yes.
hungry, I eat. I'm full, I stop eating. And it just doesn't make that chatter. It doesn't make that noise anymore. And I love what your client said. That's the perfect way to put it. It's intuitive living. It's so much more than eating.
Yeah. And intuitive eating would just be eating if diet culture didn't
That's right.
exist, right?
Right, right. We were forced to name it because of what we all
Yes.
grew up with and did for so many years.
Yes. Absolutely. So one thing I want to come back to, I with my ADHD, I like take notes while you're talking because you've said so many amazing things. But something again, back to these like myths, right? That people I see all the time on social think that intuitive eating is.
Yeah.
You mentioned gentle nutrition, right? And
Uh-huh.
that's the 10th principle of intuitive eating. So oftentimes when people come to intuitive eating, they've had many years in diet culture, right? Where when we were trying to incorporate nutrient dense foods, it
Hmm.
was for the intention of less calories,
Hmm.
restrict. How do I get smaller? And then when we go through the intuitive eating process, that intention completely transforms. And
Hmm.
it goes to things like you were saying, how do I feel pleasant in my body? What is going
Yeah.
to make me feel pleasant? What is going to fuel me? What is going to enhance my health with vitamins and minerals?
Yep.
So, how has have you seen that shift, I guess I'm asking, with
Yeah.
nutrition and even how you use the word health earlier, like how you look
Yeah.
at health? How has that
Yep.
transformed for you?
Yeah, I think it's sort of marrying what, you should do. I'm doing should in air quotes.
Hmm.
And what feels good to you. So, for example, if I was being good, quote unquote, I would walk to the Pure Raw Juice in my neighborhood and have an acai bowl with protein powder for lunch. And quite frankly, would end up in the bathroom an hour later because for whatever reason, with my system, my GI stuff, it was just too much. It was too much fruit all at once.
Hmm.
So I think that when I was not dieting, but not yet in intuitive eating, I was like, fuck it. Don't want a vegetable? Don't not gonna eat one, you know.
Hmm.
Sometimes I would crave a salad and I'd be like, oh, that's what they're talking about, and I'd eat the
Yeah.
salad, whatever. But I made a real point of not eating the should foods because I didn't have to.
Mm-hmm.
So then when I transitioned from the not dieting to the intuitive eating, I would say have a lunch that had a lot of protein in it. And it wasn't quite dinner time yet. I'm ready for a snack. And there's all sorts of produce in the fridge because my husband went to the farmer's market. And so I would approach it with no pressure on myself. Like, all right, of everything that is in the fridge right now, what looks the most delicious? And maybe it was the raspberries, you know? So I would take my little colander, I'd throw just a small handful of raspberries in, rinse them, put them on a plate, come take them to my office, and keep it low pressure. Like, oh, that looks good. That looks like it would be satisfying. It would be sweet. Like it's just what I'm in the mood for right now. And I'd have a small handful and that would be it. And it's not like I got to go out and get the acai bowl with the 10 kinds of fruit in it and the protein powder. You know, it's not
Yeah.
about the rules. It's like I would like to add more fruits into my diet because that's a place where I'm lacking and I know that it's healthy to incorporate lots of different kind of foods. How can I do that without giving myself a stomach ache? How can I do that without following any, arbitrary rules? And so sometimes I'll go back to the fridge for a handful of blueberries next because the raspberries were so good. Or
Mm-hmm.
other times that'll be enough, and maybe I'm not eating a prescribed amount of fruit that I should, but it's something. And it feels good to me. It feels like I'm taking care of myself, which looking back, I didn't do for a really long time by restricting to the degree that I did. So it kind of feels like it falls under the umbrella of self-care now, right? Doing it in a way that physically feels good in my body while adding more nutrient dense foods.
Mm. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that is again, we kind of talked about before of like, it's really hard to conceptualize this when you're in the
Yeah.
diet culture kind of mindset or when you're in the not dieting mindset because it's like how
Mm-hmm.
could I ever crave a nutrient dense food? And that's because
Mm-hmm.
when we're dieting we are food habituating these nutrient dense foods. So I think about myself like when I was peak dieting in my high school years, I would have like every day for lunch this spinach salad. Like I can like taste it. I would only use balsamic vinegar because the oil had too many calories and it was like
Yep.
I
Yep.
can picture it. And the thought of spinach for years would like
Yeah. Yeah.
like I
The ick,
cannot
right?
yeah, I got the ick, right?
Right, right.
But now because I took a break from that, right? It was just too much every single day. Now, like I love incorporating spinach into things. It's easy to put into
Mm-hmm.
omelets, easy to put into smoothies. Like it's an easy way to get nutrient density in, but not because I'm like, I need the lowest amount of calories, but because I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
how do I add fiber and nutrients that are going to make my body feel pleasant?
Yep.
But I think it's so important to let people know as they hear this, like we can logically hear that and know that
Mm-hmm.
and it still takes years and years of practice to switch from like one mindset to the other. And it's the same thing with
Yeah.
movement, right? We can logically say, I want to move my body in ways that feel pleasant and bring me joy. But if we've only been moving to burn calories, to punish, to, earn our food, air quotes,
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard to move joyfully. Like it
Yeah.
takes a long time to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so it's incredible to see you like just say all of these touch points. It is such a testimony to the work that you and Julie have done together, and I think it's so beautiful to highlight the dance that intuitive
Mm-hmm.
eating counselors do with our clients is like you are leading the dance
Mm-hmm.
and we are there to follow. Did you see Wicked by any chance?
Yeah. I'm wearing a bracelet right now that says Defy Gravity.
Okay, perfect. I was jamming to the soundtrack this morning.
Yeah.
So it's that scene from Wicked. Like you are Elphaba, Julie is Glinda, down at the
Mm-hmm.
Ozdust Ballroom, and
Yep.
you are leading, and she's following you. Like she's not
Mm-hmm.
coming in and saying, "This is the dance we're doing, and this is the step, and this is how you have
Right.
to do it." She's fully following you and trusting you and helping you build that trust in the dance that you're doing. And I think
Yeah.
it's just incredible. It's incredible to hear you and see you talk about it. It's incredible. It's incredible.
Well, and that's the biggest surprise, I think, when you do this work with your group is that you lead, that you are in charge, that the intuitive eating counselor is meeting you where you are and they're not coming in with a set of rules or telling you that you're doing anything wrong.
Hmm.
That's what ended the skepticism for me and made me say, right, like I can try this because it's just going along with what I'm doing anyway and what I'm thinking anyway. So
Yeah.
I will try this small tweak that Julie suggested. And then the next week I would realize that, you know, it was just so easy to make this small change that made me feel good.
Awesome. 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 Okay, so now we have to get to the book that is under my notebook that I'm going to move. So, your children's book that you wrote, A Celebration of Every Body. It's called B is for Bellies. And I'm going to hold it up here. It is beautiful. Julie
Thank
gifted
you.
this to my eldest daughter on her second birthday. And I remember her, like, when she opened it, she's like, "Did you know our client wrote this?" And I was like, "Excuse me, what? Like, how am I just learning about this now?"
Yeah.
So it's an incredible book that walks through the alphabet and just it's all weight inclusive. You know, it showcases diversity not only in body size, but disability, colors, like everything, right?
Mhm.
Race. Um, so talk to us, how did this book become? Like
Yeah.
how did you get to a place of like this book needs to be written?
Yeah, no, can't wait to tell you. The book has a great origin story, but I just need to add first that I didn't tell Julie about the book for a long time. And once I did, I told her that I felt like a fraud because I am writing books about
Mm.
body acceptance for children. And here I am on Zoom crying with you about the way I look in shorts. And Julie said, no, 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 it's the opposite. You're working on it. You grew up in the land of diets, and it's a lot to undo. She was like, "You're not a fraud at all." And what is the book called? Because I have to get it for Sam's Sam's child. In any case, B is for Bellies, I always say, was born in the cereal aisle of the grocery store because I was with my daughter, who was 7 at the time. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but grocery stores play music from like our college years. I mean, you're younger than me, but from my college years. So I was dancing on the cereal aisle with my kid, you know, no shame. You grow up, you don't
Yeah.
care what people think anymore. So she looked at me with these huge eyes. She looked so embarrassed. And I thought, oh, this is hilarious. It's the first time I'm embarrassing my kid by dancing in public. So, you know, I'm ready for the criticism about my dancing, and I got something totally different. She looks at me with the big eyes and says, and she's looking at my body. She looks me up and down when she says this, and she goes, Mommy, something is jiggling. Now, this was at the beginning of my journey with like kicking
Hmm.
diet culture to the curb. So my immediate reaction was shame. I didn't
Hmm.
want to show her that, you know,
Yeah.
even though I have been a work in progress, I have always, I feel like I've nailed not showing my daughters,
Yeah. Of
you know, that side of my life. Now that they're older, I talk to them about it. But
course.
so I tried really hard not to blush, not to be embarrassed when she said that. Um, and instead, I said, yeah, you know, bodies jiggle when we move. Like, um, there's nothing wrong with that. And she seemed a little like cornered and didn't want to talk to it about it anymore. So we sort of dropped it. But I couldn't get it out of my head that my second grader, who has never seen me criticize my body or turn down French fries because I'm being good, I didn't do
Mm.
anything like that in front of her. So even though I did everything, you know, right at home, she still knew at 7 that a mom's, you know, butt or thighs or whatever jiggling while dancing was a bad thing. And
Mm.
so it just hit me over the head like there is no escaping this. This is what our culture believes, and this is what we teach our children. And I came home and I jotted down J is for jiggle. And I thought, all right, well, there's a funny little poem there, and it became J is for jiggle, bodies bounce when they move, when your dancing parts wiggle, get into the groove. And I was like, that's the spin on it for my kids. And I called my literary agent and I read her J is for jiggle. And she said, hang up with me right now and write the other 25 because you're really onto something here. This was pre-Ozempic actually, when we were still sort of working toward you know, these changes. And but body acceptance for kids wasn't, it just wasn't really a thing yet. And I
Hmm.
felt like we start too late. By the time we talk about this kind of thing with our kids and with students in school, they are already having to undo damage and thinking negative thoughts about themselves if they don't fit a certain mold. And so I wrote all the other letters, and it was I've written probably about 20 books to this point. It was the easiest book I ever wrote. It took a lot of editing and revising, you know, to make it perfect, but it just poured out of me because it was everything I wished I had learned as a kid. everything I want my kids and everyone's kids to learn. And I just felt like if we plant the seeds earlier about body acceptance with kids, what are they going to grow into? And can they look at bodies and selves and worth and all of that differently than we did?
Wow. That's an incredible story. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Sure.
And it's it's so important to talk about this with our children and how amazing is this book, like this is helping heal your inner child. Like I was thinking
Uh-huh.
exactly what you said when you were like, I feel like a fraud. In my head I'm like, no, no, you're doing the work. Like
Right,
you
right.
are the cycle breaker, you are the one doing the work.
Hmm.
And this is like evidence, like hard tangible evidence of your work.
Right,
And
right.
it's incredible. And so I've read this to my daughter, and I actually shared on a previous episode of the podcast of how, my daughter's 2.5, and the other day was squeezing my belly and was like, your belly's big and squishy. And we talked about it, and we talked about
Hmm.
how bellies are all different. And it just was one of those like pinch me moments of like how cool that I get to like have that conversation and feel this way and teach her that instead of
Hmm.
don't touch my belly or like mommy needs to lose weight or whatever it may be.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. There's nothing more powerful than being a cycle breaker. And I definitely wrote the book with, the adults in mind who are reading it aloud to children. The page that I wrote, I think for me and for so many parents is for the letter C, I did C is for change. That's what bodies do. Years change your appearance, but you'll always be you. Because that applies to childhood, it applies to puberty,
Mm.
it applies to, your college years, growing up, having babies, if you're, and getting older. I mean, the changes never stop. And that's what Julie said to me with the unintentional weight loss, too. She said, I need you to look at this as something that is changing with your body. It's not a good thing, it's not a bad thing. You're not done changing either. So that's a page mentally that I go back to over and over and over again. And I do hope that adult readers, find peace in that for themselves and their inner children.
I love it. I love it so much. So I will definitely in the show notes below, people can click the link to purchase the book, so they know where to find it. And what is next for you in this third chapter of life when it comes to the next book on the horizon?
Yeah, yeah, I actually have 5 books coming out this year. So I have a
Wow.
lot of promo on my plate, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share them. I'll just mention two briefly with you. One that isn't really tied to what we're talking about, but you mentioned ADHD earlier. I co-wrote a book with two ADHD content creators called The ADHD Field Guide for Adults. It's by Kate Osborne and Eric Good. The book is funny, it's irreverent, and it's structured for a neurodivergent reader who doesn't want to look at walls of text. It's broken up so that every page there's like a nugget of information because so many adults are finding out they have ADHD. So that comes out in September. Super excited about that. And then, kind of my follow up to B is for Bellies is a book called Fiona and the Peculiar Praise, because kind of an overtone in B is for Bellies is about how your appearance is not tied to your worth. But I got really curious, and then I got frustrated, and then I got downright mad about the fact that children in our culture learn that they should be proud of their appearance and the way that they look, and that that's tied to their worth, especially little girls. So Fiona is a cat who is told all day long how cute and pretty and adorable she is, but nobody seems to notice all the amazing things she does all day long. So much like me, Fiona gets curious and then frustrated, and then in a very funny way, downright angry that nobody is noticing anything beyond the way she looks. So I thought that was a fun way to, entertain kids with a bedtime story. The key with picture books is kind of burying the lesson so it doesn't feel preachy. But I really wanted to explore that next, how our worth is not tied to the way we look.
I love that. And when does this book come out?
Fiona comes out May 13th, everywhere books are sold.
Amazing. Amazing. We'll make sure to link to that as well. And just thank you so much, Rennie, for sharing this story. I guess my last question to you, and I say this story, your story. So if someone was considering working with Find Food Freedom, what would you
Yeah.
say to them and why?
I would say whatever you think this experience is going to be, you're probably wrong. But in a good way, I think you will be surprised. And just to sort of expect the unexpected and take it as it comes. When Julie told me that body image issues are not actually about your body, I thought, yeah, okay, fine. And then we went
Sure.
through this, yeah, okay. Then we went through this activity together where I literally had to write traits of mine on flower petals that I was proud of. And it was shocking, first of all, how hard that was.
Mhm.
And then it was shocking to really just let that sink in about what body image issues are actually about in terms of self-esteem and belonging. And it's not really your body. And wouldn't you know, Julie was right. So I would say across the board, the whole experience is surprising. It's not what you would expect. The way you put it, you get to lead. You're leading the dance. No one is putting a set of principles on you. Um, and just like get ready to be surprised in the most wonderful of ways.